Hello and welcome to A Moment's Portal, a podcast where members of the Global Innovation Gathering share stories on global innovation. I'm Daniela Marzavan.
And I'm Ngei, and together we'll be hosting this 5th episode, taking you with us to a moment in the work and life of Declan Magero. Today we have someone who's quite new to the Global Innovation Gathering and is also quite new to both of us. So you're going to learn about this person with us and how they joined Ngei and their gig story as we go. So I'd like our guest Declan to introduce themselves.
Exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Declan Magero from Kenya, based in Nairobi, and I work with the Lawyers Hub, which is a regional outfit focused on the region of Africa, but we're based off in Nairobi. And what I do at the Lawyers Hub is I'm in charge of strategy and innovation. The Lawyers Hub is focused on law tech initiatives in Africa.
How long have you been working with Ngei?
Like you said, I'm pretty new to gig. Is it even 1 year, really?
So during the pandemic?
Maybe close to a year now. So I was part of the Lawyers Hub from the very onset when it started. In fact, I was consulting for Linda, who's the founder, on a separate business. And it's courtesy of that consultancy that Lawyers Hub was born, because I realized that she was kind of conflicted in the business I was consulting for her. And I challenged her to think about a business concept that agrees with her personality and professional interests. And sort of that's how Lawyers Hub was born. So I've been co-running Lawyers Hub with Linda since its inception. One of the huge challenges of starting out any outfit is growing it. The linkages that you have to make, the serendipities that you have to meet and take advantage of, those things matter. Through Linda's network, she was in touch with some of the people at Ngei, people like Geraldine, Sandra. These were connections of hers. But I never really knew where they came from and why they were in her network. So I interacted with them, but I did not necessarily understand exactly the connection. One of the things is you always kind of want to connect with someone and see how that connection will get you somewhere. So that's part of the story. Deeply, if I take a step back, into innovation a lot, especially in Africa. In fact, I even taught in the university and I've run a bunch of startups, and all this work was around innovation. So I'm deeply engaged in that. One of the huge challenges was, how do we get out of the bubble as Lawyers Hub and try to reach a little more to the rest of the world in whatever ways? So when I learned about a global innovation gathering, I even thought, this is kind of too lofty for me. Like this seems to be like a tight community, people know each other, etc. Until one of them actually nudged me and said, hey, you can actually join. Like, you should join. I was like, really? Like, what do I need to do? Like, what do I need to do? And the process was simple. And
what was the process?
I was asked to fill some form, do some justifications. And that was pretty much it. And I was formally introduced to first the new members that joined with me. And then after that, I was introduced to all the other members. And what I super enjoyed about it is nobody really patronizes you or tells you what to do. You sort of just look for the best way to connect in there. And I think that's really awesome, because it, number one, it eliminates any bureaucracies. Number two, it allows for innovation. Innovation ought to be organic. I think that should be the first commandment of innovation. It should be natural and organic. So they should allow you to interact as you want and find the right connections. Eventually, some connections in there are much stronger with some people than others, but it's just how you connect with them. And I think that's one of the things I super enjoy at Global Innovation Gathering. And truly, I think Global Innovation Gathering has exposed the Lawyers Hub just as I expected. Because, for instance, we were participating at the Republica. And by the way, I actually participated in another Republica event in Accra, Ghana, courtesy of Global Innovation Gathering. And
I remember that one.
I didn't even know it's courtesy of Global Innovation Gathering. So I guess I didn't find Global Innovation Gathering. They found me.
My next question is, what do lawyers bring to such an organization like Global Innovation Gathering?
Awesome. Thanks for the question. Firstly, you're absolutely right. The lawyers tend to be very straitjacket. I think the word on the street is uptight. And they're probably just maybe misunderstood, less understood, and they also don't reach out. So I think there's a barrier between lawyers, especially and techies. Now, the first surprise is I'm actually not a lawyer professionally.
Oh.
And it's an assumption that comes a lot because I work with the lawyers. But I think it's actually a cool thing because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm able to actually work with them.
Yeah.
And what value do they add? One of the reasons why we established the Lawyers Hub is to break that barrier. That tech is all about the human being and human enterprise. And lawyers, try to ensure that regulations, rights are well captured and represented. It is kind of silly to imagine that lawyers will not be involved in tech or techies will not be involved with law. That is the sort of barrier we've been trying to break, to tell lawyers that, hey, it's about time you start thinking about artificial intelligence because there'll be policies about artificial intelligence that need to be written.
Yeah.
These policies will have to be written with legal experts, and it's you guys. So it's about time you start interacting with these techies, find out what they're doing, and help them on the policy side of things, because that's not really their area of expertise and interest. And I think it's just like the story of Michelangelo. He was not only a great sculptor artist, he was also a great engineer. When two bodies, so he made beautiful structures. You can make great structures that, are consistent with laws of physics. But if you're not a great artist, you won't make them beautiful. But if you're a great artist also, you can make them beautiful and structurally sound. So I think it's same sort of, if I apply that example in law and technology, if you're a great lawyer that understands tech, then you can write great policies around the tech, right? And if you're also a great techie that understands law, then you probably are likely to make great products that are more representative and efficient. So this is sort of the space we're working in, and it's pretty exciting.
When people hear about hackers, makers, they think these are people who live outside of the law.
Yeah.
And I think that's a misconception. And then it will be a surprise to see, lawyers work with makers and hackers.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it's quite unimaginable. My next question would be, who in your life would not be surprised by your story with the Lawyers Hub and all the things you do?
Oh, that's pretty interesting question. I think my mother.
Why?
Because I consider my career like a wildcat type of approach. I've been very unconventional in my approach. I've done many things. I've gone out of my conventional space. It's majorly because I'm a very, very curious person. So my mother's phrase is usually, my son here cannot go hungry because he'll just walk to the neighbor's door and ask for food. And so, she's no longer surprised whenever I'm doing like something kind of weird or out of context or place. So I think my mother she actually understands because she calls and follows up.
Well, that's nice. That's really nice when you have the support of your parents and they're like, this, of course they did. There's no surprise there whatsoever. Being from Nairobi myself, Kenya.
Oh, awesome.
It's,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's that obvious.
I just thought you're a big fan of Kenya.
Yeah, well, I am a big fan of Kenya. I am a big fan of Kenya.
It's refreshing to learn that.
Yeah, so what you talk about and all these things you talk about with your family and going to the neighbor is something that really resonates with me as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Our second question, when was it obvious to you that innovation can be made outside of the West and it's not just a Western affair?
Awesome. I'll walk you back to when I was, 12 years old. I did my first startup. And the startup was called...
Now we're getting to the real deep story.
Yeah, at 12 for startup. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was called Xmas Flyer. So the thing is, I was a lot, and I'm still kind of a lot into like aviation and all this space stuff. So I was into all that stuff as a kid. I studied rockets. Like I used to walk to National Library to just read about rockets and like the Russian expeditions, etc. So
did you try to make your own rocket?
Yeah. So I figured I couldn't make a rocket because all the motors and etc. that are available. But I was a lot into the gliders because they do not necessarily need an engine. So I figured I could actually make a glider. So I got two brothers. I'm the elder one. So I drafted them into my startup. And one of them who follows me immediately was my co-engineer. And
how old were they?
I mean, like he's 1 year younger, so he was 11. Yeah. And our youngest brother is much younger, so I think he was like 6.
Wow.
So he was
really interesting.
The best age.
Yeah, you're just, so roping in your siblings into things.
Because he's 6, obviously lighter, he was going to be the test case.
Oh, this is heading to a very interesting and unexpected place.
We gathered all the material, most of them from my mama's garage. We literally stole them because there's no way she was using all that stuff. And we actually made a glider, okay, out of canvas and metal rods and this kind of things and rubbers. Of course, it was a very rudimentary, I'm not sure if
it was a prototype.
It was a great prototype. But I remember I was so determined to fly this glider because we also lived next to a cliff. So we were going to toss our little brother off. I mean, it was going to fly, you understand? So,
yeah.
But anyway, it did not fly because it was hard to hide the whole enterprise. So my mama called the bluff on us and well, I guess my little brother was lucky. But anyway, then...
when you said it did not fly, I was thinking in a whole different direction, like it just dropped like a rock. And my heart was already, oh my God, poor boy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, part of the inspiration was there were lots of documentaries back in the day by Lufthansa that partly inspired. Fast forward, this innovative, creative trick and knack has never ever left me. When I went to high school, we did a robotics startup, that focused on things like that. So I've been part of startups for the longest I have known until today. Even while teaching at the university, I try to even run seminars, innovation seminars, out of my own private time with students just to encourage them to innovate.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, and I am a big, big believer in innovation, that it's a talent that's naturally given and it has nothing to do with your region or country or anything. And therefore, even tying it back to things like gig, it is great when innovators collaborate because then they leverage on each other's learnings and they become better. Like when I walk the streets of Berlin, I see so much that can be done back in Nairobi better. When I interact with innovators, then I can even ask deeper questions. So it must never be something you're stuck with in your village. I think it's a new community that needs to connect as much as possible.
I'll go back to the question we really love asking. So other than your mother, because I have a feeling nothing you do surprises you.
That's true. Like I always find a way of justifying.
Yeah. So who in your life would not be surprised by this?
But from my mother?
Yeah.
Who would not
be surprised?
Yeah.
Well, I do have a best friend. Although I'd say my wife, I kind of feel like I surprise her all the time. Like, oh my gosh, you're doing that again? No. I have a best friend that we sort of did startups back in the day and we're still friends. So I've known him for like over 20 years. When he calls me, he's always like, okay, so what's new this time? So he's expecting something new. And we always talk innovation all the time. So he's one that would never be surprised as well.
Yeah.
His name is Arthur.
Yeah, it's nice to have like friends. There's this whole community of people who support you and they see the ideas in you. I've grown with siblings who would not hesitate to have me jump off the cliff for an experiment. So that is really awesome. So Daniela, how did you feel listening to this story?
Wow. Well, first of all, our concept is that one just listens and indulges without asking questions, and the other one asks questions, which is already a big challenge.
Yeah.
To just sit there and like, I can't ask anything, I will just listen. But through listening, you really get to writing your story in your head and maybe answering by yourself without talking.
Amazing.
So some of my main golden nuggets, my takeaways are definitely, you said tech is about human being and a human enterprise. And when you have a great lawyer who understands tech or a great techie who understands law, that's just invaluable. And I never thought about that before. But obviously, these two fields are so much connected to a human enterprise. So this was very, very inspiring. And also, I think it's very strategic and forward-thinking to put techies and policymakers together and help them shape and design tomorrow's policies, because we, especially at the Republica, know how important it is to shape those policies that create the right structures and the right pathways for innovation to thrive, to grow, and to serve humans and not machines.
Yeah, but also just going back to the whole tech and law thing, because I know there's going to be all kinds of questions. So has this meeting of techies and lawyers, have you influenced any policy? Has there been any successes? Or is there something you're driving towards, something that you're working on right now that would, show how these two groups can work together?
A great question. Our approach actually is we want to be conversation starters and conversation leaders in the region of Africa as far as law and technology is concerned. Great stories start with a conversation like we also seated here, right?
Yes.
So that's what we do. We host events, like the Africa Law Tech Festival. And these are just opportunities to start conversation, to spark ideas and conversations. So that's where we start. And then secondly, we move it to next level, which is identifying what are the policy gaps that need filling and in what country and who's playing there and how can we help them. So we're not just involved with work in Kenya, but we also work across the region to support various kinds of people that are trying to create certain policies that support the ecosystem. For instance, there's the Startup Act that is popular now in a couple of African countries. In Kenya, it's still a bill. It's a startup bill. The Lawyers Hub has contributed greatly towards the drafting and writing of this piece of legislation. We have the Huduma number. The Huduma number. It focuses on digital identity and data protection in Kenya. There are controversies around it. The lawyers have, for instance, wrote an alternative piece of legislation, an alternative Huduma number, and submitted it to sort of advise the existing one. So we've done lots of things, for instance, even in digital identity and data protection. For instance, in digital service tax, the DST, that's something that it's a regulation that's part of the Finance Act. So it was updated. So we contributed greatly towards its development. So one of the things we do is usually government, releases or rather call for public participation. We quickly organize for public participation. And the window is usually sometimes really short. So we will quickly organize, we will write responses to government, and we'll also involve experts. So we run things like policy hackathons, which is
amazing.
The hack concept is from the techie side. So we brought it to policy side. So we call it policy hackathon. And this is a hackathon around writing policy. And it's not only done by lawyers, we mix them, lawyers, techies, etc. People sit together and rapidly write a piece of legislation.
Well, that's the first time I've heard about something like this.
That's a quick prototyping approach, a reverse approach to policy making.
Yes.
Wow, I see.
Amazing.
I see this, learning from each other aspect.
So this is how we do it.
Oh, I feel like I can sit with you here and just talk about things the whole day. And unfortunately, we're time limited. And I would just like to say thank you very much for coming and talking to us and just giving us this great insight and stories to go with it. And I love seeing this. And I love that this is part of GIG.
Oh, amazing.
So inspiring.
Thank you. They say time flies when you're having a good time. So
yes,
that's amazing.
That's true.
Bye-bye, everyone.
So bye-bye.
A Moment's Portal is hosted by Daniela Marzavan and Ngei. Sound and editing, Dominic Ryniak. Technical support, Paweł and Ngei. Music by Monster Logo Studios.